Okay, good morning, everybody. It is 11 o'clock, so I think we can get started. This is Joe Philippek, Continuing Education Manager for Rails. Great to have you all with us today, and we're very pleased to have Aaron Schmidt back with us to do his webinar on user experience. Some of you may have participated in his three-part webinar series on building a more user-friendly library website in July and August. If you definitely encourage you to check it out on the archive, check out the archived recording, which you can find on the Rails website under Continuing Education Archives. A couple other notes for today. We will try to get through some questions at the end, so feel free to use the chat box should you have any questions during the presentation, and I will relay those to Aaron. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Rails website within a few days. So if you have a colleague who couldn't make it, or if you want to refer back to something, that recording is going to be there for you. And finally, I just want to make a quick plug for a few programs next week. We will be having a webinar on next Monday, 1:30, on licensing electronic content. This webinar is going to build on a copyright webinar we had from September 9th, which is also available as a recording. And it's aimed at librarians new to the licensing process, as well as, I guess, for those that have been at it for a while and are just looking for new information. On Wednesday of next week, 9:30, we'll be having a workshop here at Rails Burr Ridge Service Center on effective new employee onboarding and orientation programs. In addition to Burr Ridge, it will be offered at several different video conferencing locations. And finally, Wednesday through Friday, we'll be having a three-part webinar series on archives preservation that will present you with, I guess, a practical approach to preserving your manuscript collections and records that are housed in your repositories. So with that, I'm pleased to turn things over, I guess for the fourth time in 2 months, to our presenter, Aaron Schmidt, who is a frequent speaker on library topics, contributes to Library Journal as a columnist, and Aaron blogs about library design at walkingpaper.org. So Aaron, I'm going to unmute you, and then you can get started.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me here. Thanks to you all for coming today. And Joe, can I just get an audio confirmation that you can hear me and see my full screen here?
Yes, I can hear you, Aaron, and I can see your screen.
Okay, did you see me just correct the date on the presentation? Cool. I'm here on the 18th. Fantastic. Okay, so we're getting used to this new Fuse system. One thing that's different right now is I can't see your chats. So if it's okay with Joe, feel free to chime in via audio or just ask your questions in the chat, but know that I can't see them, and I will review them at the end of the session and we can have a conversation. Okay. So again, thanks for being here, and let's get started. So I have titled this presentation Useful, Usable, and Desirable. This is a bit of a holy trinity with user experience design. And I think it's an unparalleled framework for thinking about our libraries and assessing them and improving them. And I want to share that with you today. We have a lot of things going on in our buildings, whether it's a public library or academic library or school library. This is just a short description of one very simple library task: finding an item in a newsletter and placing it on hold and going to pick it up. There are a lot of steps involved. Libraries are complicated things. Even simple tasks like this have a lot of moving parts. And to optimize these things and make them as good as they can be, we need to pay some strict attention to them. A lot of different sorts of things here going on too, right? We have something in print, we have something electronic, we have some physical building actions, we have a customer service interaction. So how can we assess all of this and make it better? Before I get into some details about user experience, I want to just spend a brief amount of time giving my perspective on why user experience design is so important for libraries. Then we'll get into some details about what it is. I'll share some techniques with you. I'll talk just a little bit about the design process, and then we'll do some sort of big picture thinking about libraries. So why user experience for libraries? Well, we have some problems in libraries, and I don't mean to be negative right off the bat here, and I'm not trying to be a downer at all, and I'm certainly not trying to be hypercritical, But I think it's important that we accurately assess what's going on in the libraries so we can make them better. So one problem we have some problems with interaction design in libraries. So here are some examples of library interaction design. Luckily, we've moved beyond this a little bit, right? But this was one form of library interaction design. Things were arranged to elicit or prevent a certain behavior. Here's another form of library interaction design. Again, we've moved beyond this one a little bit, but this is just to illustrate that we make decisions that impact how people can interact with us. That's a seemingly common sense statement, but it's actually quite complicated. Here is another form of library interaction design. Unfortunately, we certainly have not moved past signs like this in our libraries. And this is a very common form of library interaction design where the sign is, to be honest, ugly, it's mean, and it's pretty patronizing too. Look at the bottom right-hand corner. You see that small thank you? Whoa. That's what's the emphasis here, right? Yelling at the patron. Here's another sign. I see signs like this all over libraries. This is just kind of the lowest common denominator effort. What about this sign? Can you believe it? Well, to be honest, I made this sign up just to illustrate a point here. We have a lot of signs in our libraries with the red circle and slash through it, and usually there's like a cell phone in there, right? How many of you have a no cell phone sign in your library? I bet a lot of you. Well, cell phones can be annoying, and people on cell phones can be annoying, but so can babies, right? We would never think about putting a sign up like this in our library, and I think it's kind of equally as crazy to have a no cell phone sign in the library, considering that people do a lot of other things on their phones besides be annoying. And what we really should be regulating here is behavior, not technology. The language we use in our libraries is another important form of interaction design. I was the director of a small library outside of Portland where I live, and when I got there, I saw this on our shelves. Cookery. Whoa. No one uses this language except hardcore geeks. And this was the official Library of Congress subject heading. Thankfully now it's been changed to cooking, which I think is a small user experience victory. Our physical buildings are an important form of interaction design. Here we have the classic reference desk as fortress, protecting library workers from patrons. This one has a computer that's toppled over. These desks definitely set up a certain dynamic in our buildings, and we need to pay attention to that. Here's another one that maybe looks a little bit better. It's a little bit lower, slightly more approachable, but still, it's kind of a big fortress. Not exactly as collaborative as we want to be. Here is another one that maybe looks a little bit better. It certainly has a nice, friendly, smiling librarian at the desk, and that's a good sign, but also sort of a weird dynamic. Do they really expect a library user to sit in this chair while the librarian towers over them? Hopefully this is really meant to be a stand-up type situation, and if that's the case, then I think this is definitely trending in the right direction for desk design in libraries. Point here is that our reference desks have not changed for a very long time, and people's information preferences and desires and habits have changed, just a little bit since then. And our buildings should sort of reflect people's preferences and reflect the way we want to conduct our transactions. We have a lot of rules in our libraries, and this sets up a dynamic and is certainly a form of interaction design. At this library, can't play any games except Magic School Bus. That's the good game. Everything else, not so much. Finally, our websites are an important form of interaction design. A lot of people use our web presences, maybe in some cases more than our physical buildings, and we need to give them adequate attention. Like Joe mentioned, I recently gave a 3-part series about improving websites, so you can go back and take a look at all that stuff. I won't be talking too much about websites today, other than to mention it's certainly part of this picture. Oh, I really love this one too. I just want to show one more example. Here, this library, I mean, this is such a library thing to do. I love it. Instead of improving the language they use on their site and making the language intelligible, they put up a glossary on their website, hoping to educate people, hoping that people will read and look up all these library definitions. Very nice gesture, to be sure, and I certainly understand the intention behind this, but unrealistic. Oh, Swan, wow, look at this. I do a search for John Steinbeck. What do I get? Not too much. Yikes. So not only our websites, but other electronic resources that we use are sometimes quite difficult to use. I have a mantra in my librarianship, and it's this: no library user should ever have to see the word Boolean if they don't want to. Um, our databases are very difficult to use, and I think usage stats illustrate this, but a definite form of interaction design. All of this interaction design stuff kind of came to my mind, or came to mind to me, or I realized the importance of it when I was working at the reference desk actually at the Thomas Ford Memorial Library in Western Springs, Illinois. I was a newly minted librarian, reference librarian, and working the desk multiple times every day. I would get asked for a stapler, and I would have to go in a drawer, get it for the person. The person would use it, thank me, and I put it back. And while that was an okay interaction and certainly nice to talk to people, it wasn't as convenient as it could be for me or for the library users. And finally, I realized, why are we hiding this in the drawer? Let's just put it out. Let's make the library easy to use. So this interaction design stuff certainly is part of the usability, or the usable of useful, usable, and desirable. But aside from interaction design issues, we have some larger scale issues that I think have to do with the usefulness and desirability of libraries. And these are kind of large scale existential, what are we doing here questions. So it also has to do with, I guess, the future of libraries and creating the future of libraries. Largely in the past, we've been places of access to information, whether this is a print book or databases that no one knows the name of. We have solved an important problem, and this problem was information scarcity. We've pooled resources and provided our communities these resources, acted as guides for this information, and that was and continues to be an important role for libraries. And it's certainly our main role. Now you might say, okay, Aaron, that's fine, but we do other things too at my library. We've got story time, we've got programs, we've got all sorts of cool services. True, I get it. You definitely do, and I think that's an important part of the portfolio of library services. But we are still known for being places of access to information, and in particular, places of access to books. Actually, I need to update the slide because OCLC has redone their study, their library perception study. This was from 2010. And every time they ask people, what do you think of when you think of a public library or library, they say books, increasingly so. I think the percentage is even higher this time around, continues to go up. And, that's interesting. OCLC thinks this is a strategic advantage in a certain way because it's a strong brand. I happen to think OCLC maybe has some motivation to keep libraries in the book business. And I'm not a book hater at all, but I just think it's a little bit of a shaky ground to be so associated with books when books are changing very rapidly. Now, I'm not here to give you the sky is falling because of ebooks presentation, and I'm not trying to fearmonger at all. All I'm trying to say, or all I want to bring up, is it's a changing world out there with commercial content and reading. And I think we need to be paying attention to it, considering how central it is to what we have done in the past. People are noticing interaction design problems with our electronic books. And any of you who work in the front lines certainly have heard library members ask you to help them with their devices, etc. Many libraries have programs dedicated to familiarizing people with their new devices, and that's great. But here we have a comic that someone was inspired to create titled Why Digital Rights Management Doesn't Work, or How to Download an Audiobook from the Cleveland Public Library. He goes through all these steps. I love step number 8, get cryptic error, right? Continues on, and what do we have on step 19? Give up on stupid library. Not cool, right? This is not the sort of feeling that we want to be giving to people for using our services. So this is a little bit problematic. So let's say we recognize this problem, and let's say that we could create something like this, where we have an amazing interface, access to all of the commercial content we want, and we could do this for our community. Is this a goal? Is this what we should be doing? Or is this the goal? A single search box on our website. But let's be honest, if we did it, it would probably end up looking a little bit more like this. Is this our goal? I say no. Why? Because if we concentrate on like doubling down on providing access to content, we're just going to be copying what other companies are doing. And this puts us at a complete strategic disadvantage because our position is therefore totally reactionary, where we're just kind of trying to play catch up. There are some pretty big players in the commercial content world, and we don't really have budgets like these folks. So in my mind, the ship has already sailed on the future of commercial content, and it will continue to be an important role for public libraries, but there is a big, vast opportunity if we don't have to do as much with commercial content. I'm not saying that is going to go away overnight, because it's not, but looking at the long term here, we have some other opportunities. We can do some unique things that will put us at a strategic advantage. Focusing on content in libraries and commercial content and content consumption is what Joan Fry Williams has called the grocery store model of librarianship, where you get a piece of content, you go home, and you consume it there. That's fine, but it's not as rich as libraries are, and it doesn't really encapsulate how transformative libraries can be. Other content houses are shuttering. Borders is completely dead, I'm pretty sure. Blockbuster is gone. Are these canaries in the coal mine? I don't know for sure, but clearly places that are circulating information in this way or circulating content in this way are having hard times. So there's only one good kind of circulation statistic, right? One that is higher than the last month. If your circ stats are flatlining, it's no good. If your circ stats are declining, definitely no good. This is not sustainable. We can only physically circulate so many items in a year. So let's say we optimized and made great interfaces and we're circulating a ton of content. What happens when we reach that? How are we going to communicate with our stakeholders? So this is another way, I think, another aspect of focusing on circulating content kind of is a little bit short-sighted for us. This is why stories like this totally freak me out. Here we have the first 24-hour automated library in the US. And you can't see me, but I just did air quotes with the word library. Is this a library? This is a great service for the people in Norman, Oklahoma. But this is a kiosk. And I don't think we want to reduce everything we do to just being a book distribution kiosk, right? That really shortchanges us. So this is not the goal. At least this is not my goal for libraries. So can we innovate our way out of this situation? Yes, I think so, but I do see library innovation being a bit shallow at the moment. For the past, I don't know, 10 years or so, innovation in libraries has largely been waiting for things to happen in the larger tech world and then trying to apply these things to libraries. This has at times found some unnatural fits. It's given us some very good things as well. But regardless, this is a reactionary form of innovation where we're just waiting and we're passive, and then we are just using tech tools that are available out there. So this to me isn't really innovation. This is just using tools, which is not quite innovative. This is just being a normal person. So focusing on tools over motivations is in libraries is quite weird because we don't focus on tools so much in other aspects of our lives. So no one wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, today I really want to use my measuring cups. That's going to be amazing. Let's use measure. I'm going to use my measuring cups all day." Um, Instead, people will focus on the motivation and say, "Hey, today I want to make this great dessert for my family or my friends because I want to do something nice for them." So, my call to action here is let's focus on motivations. Let's focus on the end results rather than tools, because let's face it, apple pie is definitely better than measuring cups. But the thing about tools, though, it's interesting. They can be seductive, though, right? I'm like doing everything in my power to like practice some restraint and not buy a juicer. I really want to start juicing vegetables and fruit and stuff. I think it'd be so fun. But I know a couple people that have them, and they're like, you'll use it for a month and then you'll stop. Tools can be seductive, so I understand it. I'll keep you posted on my juicing. I think through true innovation, we can find a more natural fit for some tech tools and go deeper with using them. Okay, so all of that is a preamble to user experience design in libraries, but I think it's really important to think about this background to illustrate and know why user experience design is different and why it's so important. So I want to say what it's not first. UX design is not just for tech. It was kind of born out of the software development and web development world, but user experience design can apply to every aspect of your library. And it is certainly not just throwing technology at a problem to make it better. Little secret here, creating a good user experience in libraries is pretty much oftentimes equivalent to creating organizational change. So I hope that doesn't make you want to pull your hair and run away, but it's true. So it's not just technology, it goes deeper. Also importantly, good user experience is not just customer service and improving customer service. Customer service is one aspect, certainly an important aspect, but it's just one aspect of the overall user experience. So we have all these different touch points. We have customer service, we have our buildings, we have our print material, we have stuff online, we have the location in our libraries, we have how our libraries look, we have the signage, we have how they smell. All of these different things are ways that people perceive and interact with the library. And all of these things add up to form an overall user experience. So let me give you a quick example. I had to fly from Midway to Toronto a few years back, and I heard that Porter Airlines had some good flights. So I went on their website and booked a flight. It was a nice website. It was easy to use. It was cute. I got to Midway. The ticket people were quite friendly. They were dressed well, had good new computers. The flight was on time. I boarded the flight. It was a clean, new plane. I was served a beverage in an actual glass. Their in flight magazine was titled The Journal of Porter Airlines, totally taking themselves way too seriously. I loved it. Um, let's see what else. Oh, important touch point. The plane did not crash and it arrived on time. Fantastic. On my return back to Chicago, the gate at the Toronto City Airport offered free snacks, free drinks, free wireless. Their wireless network was named Mr. Porter, who is the name of the little raccoon mascot here. All of these things were aligned to give me a good experience. They had thought about all these different touch points, and it was quite apparent that they were putting forth some effort. And I think we need to think about all the aspects of our libraries in a similar fashion. So definitely want to emphasize that while human interaction is important because we're social creatures, it is just one aspect of many different touch points. So in user experience design, we need to realize that we are not our patrons, and we need to design our libraries for our library users rather than ourselves. So this distancing of ourselves from our library users is a great way to actually get us a little bit closer in a certain way, because we can develop more empathy for them if we realize that they're different and designed for them. And developing empathy is a key aspect of creating a good user experience. And I don't really mean empathy in a completely touchy-feely way. I mean empathy in terms of just realizing that these people have needs, and these needs and desires might be different from the needs and desires of a librarian. So, useful, usable, and desirable. These three traits are not mutually inclusive. So something can certainly be usable, but not very useful. Something can be useful, but very difficult to use. You can think of all sorts of examples. And our goal is really to create products and services and make our libraries that are somewhere in the middle there, right? They're useful, usable, and desirable. We all love a good Venn diagram. So this is an important one. Here's an example. I travel a little bit for work. I was in Minnesota, waking up early one morning on Central Time. I opened the shower curtain and I saw this totally crazy looking shower head. And I thought, what is this thing? And really, I'm not that much of a princess. I don't care what shower heads look like, but I think anyone may notice that this thing was totally crazy looking. I wasn't really off put by it or anything. I just noticed it. And eventually I got in the shower, and I'm a little bit of a tall dude, so I usually have to adjust these things. I grabbed the shower head, and instantly I knew what was going on. That knob there below the nozzle fit really well in my hand, and I was able to adjust the shower head quite easily. Now, adjusting the shower head isn't something I usually have a problem with at all, but this was designed well enough that I kind of noticed that it was well designed and it was quite ergonomic. So that's this is a quick example of something that at first like kind of wasn't very desirable. I thought it was a little bit weird. Not that ultimately I care about it, but it turned out to be quite useful and quite usable. User experience design has this perspective that says we can't shout loud enough to force people to use our libraries. Marketing is important, public relations is important, advertising is important, but there has to be some meat behind all of that to actually get people to engage with libraries. So instead of shouting, user experience design has us listen. This really is the key. So if you take one thing away from today, I want it to be that we need to develop a process for listening to our communities to find out what they want, to find out what they need, so we can design our services accordingly. So there's an article that goes along with this really well. It's from the September 2007 issue of American Libraries. It's called What's a Library Worth? The author is Eleanor Jo Rogers. In this article, she has this great framework where she says no library exists in an ecosystem. Every library has a host ecosystem, whether it's a town or a university or whatever, school. And she says what's good for the host ecosystem is good for the library. And instead of focusing on doing things that benefit the library must turn outward, listen to its community and its host ecosystem, and do what's good for the host ecosystem. This benefits the library in two ways. Number one, like I mentioned, what's good for the host ecosystem is good for the library, and there's a sort of rising tide action that can happen. Number two, if the library is successful in listening to its community and is an important player in improving the community, the host ecosystem is going to do everything it can to promote the library and recognize it as a positive force in the host ecosystem. This is going to lead to more funding, it's going to lead to more use, it's going to lead to more support. This is exactly what we're after, right? We want to do good things for our community, and we want to be used, and we want support. So check out What's a Library Worth? It is a great article on library advocacy and really user experience design, even though she does not use that term at all. Highly recommended reading. So let's talk about library UX and how to do user experience in libraries. I have sort of set the stage about why user experience design might be important, shared a little bit about what it is. Now let's get into some techniques. So luckily, we have a good set of tools for listening to our communities and listening to our host ecosystems. We can consider that doing user research. Every library has a collection development policy, and that's great. That's useful. I also think libraries need to have a sort of user research development plan as well, where there's a systematic approach to learning about the community. This is a web-based technique, usability testing, and I've talked about it in previous sessions. And it's a great technique to get started doing user research with because it's quite easy to do, and it's really a nice way to demonstrate the value of user research. So even though I'm not focusing on the web today, I just wanted to bring up usability testing as a great gateway user research technique. In usability testing, you watch people use your website, essentially. You give them some tasks to do, and you watch them do it. Things that you can easily do on your website because you know it quite well and you've operated on it quite a bit, might be difficult for a beginner to do. And this is a nice way to demonstrate this gap between librarian knowledge and library user knowledge. So consider doing that. And also, usability testing is a great way to move discussions in your library from opinions to actual facts about library users. Now this is tricky because I do think librarians can have very informed opinions, especially people that have sort of been thinking about users for a long time. But I think that unless these discussions are grounded in some sort of data and some sort of facts, they're not as valuable as they can be. So instead of arguing about, oh, it'd be great if the logo on our website was blue, I think that would be good. And no, I don't know, blue's not so great. Those discussions are not very useful. And a lot of times, in my experience, committee meetings, et cetera, can be filled with people spouting off opinions. And user research, and in particular, starting off with usability testing, is a great way to change that kind of dynamic. Okay, so here is a similar technique in a way, but for your physical building. Conducting a UX audit is a nice overview, nice way to get an overview of the user experience that your library is providing. In a user experience audit, you're going to assess your library, but before you do that, I highly recommend you start going on some service safaris. This is a great technique, and it's a way for you to sharpen your analytical and observational skills. It's also a fantastic way to get paid to go drink coffee or go to a museum or go to a park or whatever. So I honestly think this is quite valuable. So if you're going to start thinking about the user experience of your library, it helps to get out of the library and start assessing things elsewhere. Why? When you remove yourself from the library and put yourself in a new situation, you free yourself of kind of baggage and you sort of take blinders off. Being in the library day in, day out, we sort of are blind to a lot of things going on. So getting a fresh perspective can be really good. So conducting a service safari, ask yourself, create a worksheet for folks that are going to do these and ask these questions. These are just some examples. What's the goal of the service? What was good about it? What detracted from it? Stuff like this. This is just a great way to practice describing experiences. This is definitely essential to describing an experience in your own library. So here is a quick promo. My colleague Amanda Etches and I wrote a book, just came out this summer via ALA Editions. It's called Useful, Usable, and Desirable. And it is essentially a guide to conducting a user experience audit of your library. So, I'm not trying to be salesy here. I'm just, one of your libraries there, buy it. Everyone else can just interlibrary loan it. I'm totally fine with that. But it's really great. It's consists of a bunch of different checkpoints, and each checkpoint gives you a something to think about in terms of your user experience. And there's a scoring system, and there's also information about how to improve each checkpoint. So checkpoints are divided into things like your web presence, your physical building, your policies. So we're really happy about it. I think it's a great guide for assessing and improving your UX. In addition to doing a UX audit, consider having someone else come in and do a UX audit of you. So if you have a similar like-minded institution, create a UX partnership where you almost can do like a secret shopper type thing where you go to someone else's library, you check it out, you talk about what you like, what you don't like, or you observe, and vice versa. Then you can have a debrief meeting afterwards. This will take some trust, it will take some tact, and it can really be valuable. A nice way to share some good data and to get someone else's perspective, which is certainly invaluable. So, I mentioned this takes some trust and tact. Central to doing user experience design is doing criticism. You have to be critical when doing this stuff. Now, this doesn't mean you need to be negative or you need to be mean. Those are actually probably very bad tactics, right? You want to be polite. You want to do this in the spirit of constructive criticism, whether this is internal or external. But just know that we have to be comfortable with being critical in a polite, constructive way. Love this idea from Brian Herzog called Work Like a Patron Day, which is another great way to assess what's going on in your library. So instead of doing your job with your computer at your cubicle or wherever you do it at your desk, use the tools that you are providing your library users and see if you have a difficult time doing your job, and this can give you a fresh perspective about what's going on in your library. Okay, so that's just some overall stuff about how to assess what's going on in your library. Let's get to some specifics. How can you get a grasp on the signage in your library? If you have a library of any decent size, I recommend that you do some walkthroughs with folks. Get someone in front of your building that has never been there before and ask them to complete some certain tasks, like make a photocopy or find a restroom or find the children's department or whatever. Watch how they walk around your building, see what signs they look at, see where you might put some signs, see what signs you can take away. It can be very informative. Doing a signage audit is definitely a great thing, and realizing that we put up all sorts of different signs in our libraries, signs meant to regulate people's behavior, signs meant to help people accomplish things like the taped sign on the photocopier, directional signs meant to get people places, signs that identify certain things in the library, like say a reference desk, and informational signs like posters. It's just kind of a useful breakdown of all the different signs in our libraries. And creating a template system, just like we would for our websites, that can be employed throughout the whole library. So there's a cohesive branding scheme, can really calm down the environment and be a useful way to get some cohesion and just make your library a more pleasant place. So conducting a signage audit, by the way, consists of creating a big spreadsheet and taking note of what signs are where, what kind of signs they are, if they need to be improved, how they could be improved, etc. And this is a nice way to get a grasp on the signage overall. Creating a journey map is a great foundational user experience technique. And what I showed you before is actually the beginning of a very simple journey map. So a journey map is a list or a representation of the steps it takes to use a product or service. So in this case, like I said, this is a journey map for placing a hold on an item and picking it up in the library. Here are all the steps that this person can go through to complete this journey. So there are a lot of different journeys that people go through in your buildings, right, to do all the different things that they do. Breaking them down in this way lets you examine each touch point, and you can therefore assess each touch point. So here's an example. I was working with the library, and they chose to, and I think this is a great way to do it, assign an emotion to each step along the way. This is for booking a meeting room. We see some neutral faces, we see some sad faces, we see a crying face, the idea here, right, is to remove those sad faces and make this journey a lot more pleasant and to optimize the whole experience. So you can ask yourself if there's a different way to accomplish a step. Maybe you can just remove the step. Maybe you can make it better. But this is a way to create a detailed example of all the activities happening in your library. Okay, buildings and furniture. How can we improve these things without breaking the bank, right? This is a great technique, contextual inquiry. This is a technique borrowed from the field of anthropology, and it's one that any of us can do in our libraries. It's essentially sitting down and observing people behave in context, right? In this case, in the context of the library. And let's say, for instance, you wanted to improve the circulation area in your library because there are a lot of lines, or people just weren't happy about it, or it just didn't seem convenient, or you just wanted to learn about it in general. So what you do is you sit down, and for half an hour at a time, 45 minutes, you sit down and observe and record behavior. You don't judge at all, you don't analyze at all, you just record what you see. So if I was going to look at self-check machine area, I would sit there and I would write things like puts down bag, doesn't have a place to set bag, or chats with person using self-check machine next door, checks out one book, et cetera, et cetera. So you record all the behaviors of what people are doing, and you put them in a spreadsheet or some sort of document. Okay, that's fine. You do that for half an hour. You're not going to learn that much, but you do it a few times. You have other colleagues do it a few times. Then you compile things and look for patterns. And if you see a lot of patterns developing, you can be assured that many people are doing these things, and you can then design improvements to help the process go smoother. So just a quick example. I was working with the Central Library in Mexico City, this huge, big, great building. On each floor, they had reading spaces like this, one in each corner. Big, seemingly comfortable chairs, nice table, little working area for laptops there. However, in my time there, this was the only time I saw this space being used as intended. The rest of the time, I saw people like this. So there's something about this space that was not supporting the way people really wanted to behave. I don't know why, and I wasn't really there to work on this issue, so we didn't pursue it too much. But it's just interesting to me that people would choose to sit like this with this cord across the way. Just doesn't seem comfortable. So why weren't people using the desk? Maybe it was too bright. Maybe they didn't like to have their back next to the big open space. But something wasn't quite right about the situation, and you could only learn this by observing these spaces, right? So definitely read up on contextual inquiry and start doing some of that. So there is a quote attributed to Henry Ford. He didn't actually say this, it turns out, but it's still a great story, so I'm still mentioning the quote. It goes like this. If I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So the point here is that people really just wanted to get from point A to point B in a faster and safe fashion. They didn't care whether this was a horse or a car or whatever. So the point here is that in our user research, we can listen to people, but we don't necessarily need to follow what they are doing. This is why the two forms of user research that libraries are most familiar with, surveys and focus groups, are actually sort of the least valuable. Why? Because these are attitudinal research techniques that look at people's opinions. We want to be designing our libraries for behavior, not opinions. So focus groups and surveys, people can answer however they want. People don't always behave how they say they will behave. Shocker. So we need to be looking directly at their behavior. User interviews is a great behavioral research technique if you can get people actually talking about what they do. And user interviews is doing a user interview is sort of like doing a reference interview where you ask open-ended questions about a topic. They're exploratory in nature. You record what you learn, And again, you look for patterns in compiled behaviors. These can be useful in developing personas, which are fictional representations of actual library users. And definitely recommend you consider creating personas for the people in your community. Here we have personas for a university library. You can see they contain a name, a picture, a quote, some goals. And if you can create personas for the people in your community that you're trying to serve, you then have a representation of who you're designing for, and you can make sure your services are designed accordingly. So who should be doing this in the libraries? I'm a big fan of cross-departmental UX teams. Don't make this the job of one person. Create a team of a bunch of different people that can work on this together. It can help diffuse some of the political aspects or territorial aspects. It can give people good cross-departmental knowledge in this team. But having a team work on this stuff is a great way forward. A great first step for a UX team is to create a user experience vision or a statement of how it a goal, like a goal statement of what it's going to be like to use the library. So this is an aspirational statement that the organization then can kind of like move towards, and when it makes decisions, it can use this as a little guide. So I want to talk a little bit about design and the design process, because whether you know it or not, you are a designer all the time whenever you make a decision in your library. So what is design? Don't worry, you do not need a black turtleneck or glasses. You're doing it regardless. Design is simply arranging things for a purpose. And this is a vague definition, but it's still an accurate one. So anytime you are thinking about a service decision or making a program or certainly putting out a flyer, these are design decisions. Everything around us is designed. It's just something we do. So this was designed. This happens to be unintentional design or poor design, where no design decisions really have been made. This was like the default typeface. The design decision that they did made to center justify is kind of like a poor decision. But everything around us is designed. Here's another good way to think about design. The role of the designer is being a good host, anticipating the needs of their guest. This is a great way to think about our libraries, I think. Design does not need to happen by some genius sitting in a corner with a sketchbook coming up with fantastic ideas. Design is a process, or can be a process, that we can all get better at. Check out The Art of Innovation by Tom Kelly for a little bit more about the design process and 5 steps involved. Even better yet, this Design Thinking for Educators from Stanford's Design School or D School is a free PDF that you can get. This toolkit introduces you to many different design techniques and illustrates this process. There are a lot of different flavors of the design process, but they're all basically like this. Understanding the problem you're trying to solve, observing behavior around that problem, should sound familiar, right? Prototyping solutions, figuring out which of prototypes work, which don't, and evaluating them, and then finally implementing a solution. This is a circular, cyclical process, and it's a great framework for creating things and improving things in our libraries. So classic example is this dude who noticed his wife, arthritic wife, using this vegetable peeler that hurt her hands, and he asked this question, she asked this question, why do kitchen tools hurt my hands? He made a bunch of prototypes of more ergonomic vegetable peelers, chose the best aspects of all of them, and came up with this one. And I bet a lot of us have this in our kitchen drawers right now. So sort of getting towards wrap-up time here, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about improved interaction design and improved programs and services in libraries. So improving interaction design deals with all these touch points. How can we make these better? I think it's not easy, but we can do it. So this is a bad example. It's not easy, but it's not always rocket science, right? So this is a bad example. Just left justifying this sign is a big improvement. Creating a more appropriate typeface is a big improvement. Making a bullet list is a big improvement. Some interaction design in libraries is easy to improve, in that it's just paying some attention to the basics of graphic design can be a big improvement. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about improved interaction design. It's a certainly rich area to explore, and I think improving usability is certainly important, but I am a little bit more concerned with the usefulness and desirability of libraries, because we can make our stuff as useful as possible, but if there's not anything interesting there, it doesn't really matter if it's useful, or if it doesn't really matter if it's usable, excuse me. So let's talk about libraries that have found some purpose. If we're going to be places of collections, I think we should explore some different and alternative collections. Now, I'm not saying that your library needs to start circulating bakeware. That might not be appropriate for a community, but this community has a big representation of bakers, so they are doing something useful for it. You've seen similar things with tool libraries as well. Close to many of you, Chicago Public Library is circulating internet hotspots and laptops. This is an interesting, different sort of collection than print materials. Here is one that's very different, and I think very interesting. In upstate New York, you can check out a plot of land from the library, and people are gardening together and growing food together at the library. This is a very different collection, but it's one that's relevant to the community, and it's one that is all about kind of creation rather than just consumption. Content experiences are important in libraries. This is a classic story time example, right? And we can create all sorts of experiences. Cookbook clubs, there are many throughout the United States. Here's one in Kansas where people are taking cookbooks home and then cooking together at the library, or cooking at home and coming together and eating. This is a way to add value to content rather than just sending people home with a book. You're adding some more experience to this situation. Cleveland Public Library has partnered with a lot of organizations to create literary lots, which takes undeveloped places and kind of abandoned places, lots in Cleveland, and is creating representations of storybooks and kids' books. So kids and parents can experience these books in different ways. And again, adding some different value to the situation. This isn't exactly a content experience, but here at my home library at Multnomah County, they're doing a really neat thing, developing relationships with library members. You can find a librarian who is into the same stuff that you are, and you can communicate with this person via email or Skype or chat, whatever way you want. This is not entirely dissimilar from stuff we do. It's just sort of a different way to think about it. So having a cool library space like this certainly wouldn't hurt to have a big impact on people, but you don't need to have a fancy building to think about your library space and to do neat things with your library space. For example, well, I'm not saying the Oak Park Public Library is not a neat building or anything, but they have just taken one part of it. Many of you have seen this, I bet, and they have this space called the Idea Box, where it's flexible space. There's different sort of exhibits. Here we have one that was during the winter. They made a little park setting with bright light to get their members through the Chicago winter. Again, I'm not saying you need to do something like this, but just think about the advantages of your library space and be creative. Here is something that is definitely culturally appropriate, contextually appropriate, maybe not so much for the United States, but certainly for Finland. The forthcoming Helsinki Central Library is going to have a sauna in the library. Pretty amazing, right? I want to visit it. Cool. Check out some stuff around this new forthcoming library in Aarhus, Denmark. They're calling it the living room of the living room of the community, and they're taking the space very seriously, and they're designing it to support all sorts of different behavior. Really neat library space forthcoming. So not only are library spaces interesting, but I think getting out of the library is quite interesting as well. So here we have library is set up in the airport in Amsterdam, in Schiphol. Here we have the Boise Public Library doing the same thing, setting up a little digital kiosk in the library. So this is kind of an outreach effort and making the library convenient to use in this way. Oh, co-located libraries I think are also very interesting. So here we have the Anythink Library partnering with a public school district to have this big campus where there's schools and public library and event spaces Smart use of money, smart collaboration. Here we have another co-located library. This public library is in a mall that contains a shopping center and a gym and a restaurant. Pretty cool stuff. Here we have just another good example of graphic design in libraries, very welcoming. Signage and creating different zones for different behavior, I think, is a good way forward. I'm getting short on time here, so I'm just going to go through some of these quickly. We have a great website product called Prefab that is a template that you can use to create a website that obeys the rules of good graphic design. Check that out if you're in need of a new website. Creation spaces. So instead of focusing on consumption, this library, you can check out a guitar, there's a radio station, there's a recording studio. We see the whole maker movement in libraries, quite popular right now. Doesn't have to be focused on geek stuff. It can be music stuff, it can be craft stuff, it can be cooking stuff. But here we have the Brooklyn Public Library partnering with musicians to have them be in studios in the library. This can really impact like the world. Here we have Chance the Rapper, who was kind of really popular last summer, 2 summers ago. He kind of cut his chops at Chicago Public Library's U Media program, and he practiced there, and now he's a famous rapper. Here we have someone who was printing different prototypes of a prosthetic hand for his son in the library, doing different iterations. This is a really great story. So this makerspace stuff can have a really big impact on people's lives, and having these tools available can improve communities, to be sure. I think moving towards publishing, helping folks publish their information, and including the stuff that our communities, enthusiast groups make in our catalogs is a good way forward. Also, we can use our catalogs to connect people to people instead of just people to information. Similarly, have space to develop businesses. This is a popular idea now, I think, somewhat, where supporting learning and business development in libraries. Ultimately, I want our public libraries to solve problems. I love the story from the Free Library of Philadelphia, where they have essentially invited homeless people in the library on a deeper level. There's a cafe that is run by a group that helps rehabilitate folks, and this is a great way to help solve the problem of homelessness in Philadelphia. San Francisco Public Library has social workers. Pima County Public Library in Arizona has public health nurses in all of their locations. This is providing a good service to the community. Enoch Pratt Free Public Library is partnered with this organization to help solve the problem of food deserts in libraries. You can order groceries and pick up healthful groceries in the library. Great project here, Vancouver Public, co-located with the YWCA. This will be affordable housing for low-income single mothers, essentially at the library. Amazing. This outside of Malmo, Sweden, the Garage Library opened essentially as an empty warehouse. They co-created the library with the community. And this is a really fantastic idea. So they did a ton of user research, a ton of conversations to end up with a design for the library's programs and services. Ultimately, I want us to be the community experts. I want us to have so much information about our host ecosystems that we are the people turn to when more information is needed. I think to do this, we're going to have to promote new standards of success and get off the hamster wheel of circulation. That's a tough one to do, but I think necessary. And even though all these things are really neat and new, I kind of want libraries to do fewer things. I want us to shed some of the things we do and do a better job with the remaining things. This is a tough thing, especially in public libraries where we want to be all things to all people, right? But I mean, imagine just having half the amount of programs that you have, right? And spend more money and effort on making the remaining ones really good. Is that a good strategy? I kind of think so. But before we do all this cool stuff, we really do need to make libraries interesting, easy to use, and then make them interesting. And when we're thinking about this stuff, consider this quasi-scientific equation from the designer of Netflix. When asked about how they think about new features and services, He said, well, you know, a lot of things can add value, but they also add distractions at the same time. So we have this equation where we think about this balance between how much value something's going to add and how much it's going to get in the way. So what's the net value of doing something? Finally, before I take some questions, I just want to leave us with this, our international symbol of libraries. This is a great symbol. It's iconic. It's great in certain ways. It's iconic. It's easy to understand, but it's also a little bit scary to me because it's just someone reading alone. And I don't think this is what we want to be known for. So here's my redesign of it. It's certainly less iconic and it's a lot more messy, but I think it's possibly more representative of what we want to do. Whew, okay, I really rushed towards the end there, but I did it in an hour. Questions. I'm going to have my contact information up here, and I'll bring the chat up. And sorry I ran a little bit long, but I can stick around for a few minutes if you can. And
Great, Aaron, thank you. It's 12. We can certainly get through a few questions. So if you want to ask Aaron a question, use the chat box to do so. There was one question that came in earlier from someone wanting to know if their library wants to do a you know, as you describe it, a user experience audit kind of on everything. Where would you suggest they start? Would you look at their sort of virtual space first in terms of website and catalog, or look first in the building for signage and placement of materials and so forth?
that's a great question. And you know what I would say? I would say instead of going deep with any one thing in your library, it almost might be interesting to go a bit broader and but be more holistic. So do spend some time assessing your website and your ILS, spend some time assessing your physical building, and do an initial scan. And I think doing an initial scan of the entire library and many different aspects of it will naturally lead you to wanting to dive in deeper to another place. Um, and this place can be either a place that needs a lot of work or is just important in general to the library. So I would say go focus on having a bit of breadth when you start rather than depth.
Okay, very good. Wow, that is the only question I've gotten so far. So I will give just one more moment, although it is lunchtime, so that might be why. I will just make another plug for Aaron's three-part webinar series on building a user-friendly website, because it certainly applies these concepts of user experience to your virtual presence. And you know, whether you're going through a web redesign now or thinking of doing that, or maybe it's just to kind of see if you can get a few ideas. I would definitely, oh, and Colleen's already interlibrary loaned your book, Aaron, so
Nice, all right, good deal.
excellent. Okay, I'll give it 10 more seconds, and if no final questions, then Aaron, I'll thank you once again. I'll remind everyone this webinar will get up on the Rails website probably by Monday. So share with any colleagues. And with that, enjoy the rest of your week, Aaron, and everyone else.
All right, thanks a lot, everybody. Be in touch.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye now.